Good evening. You're listening to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me is Professor Pixel. We're continuing our James Bond series in order. In tonight's film, You Only Live Twice, where James Bond goes full ninja. He even, I think, gets married in this film here, too, so he can defeat Blofeld because Spectre's there, and it's played by the great Donald Pleasance, who's
Oh,
just,
yeah.
oh, he's so good. It's so delicious. I'll start off by saying here, Pixel, with You Only Live Twice. This is a bit of a letdown to me. It's not a Bond film, but it feels like filler, and I don't think that is a bad thing. We get into a situation where we have ones like Thunderball; they're just action packed, and that's mostly what it is. And I preferred more of a spyish, Cold Warish sort of cat and mouse James Bond rather than full born action. And sometimes balancing the mix is kind of tough. However, in You Only Live Twice, they definitely do it. It's just a bit of an absurd movie, but I want to point out it's the story is written by Roald Dahl, who's the guy who did James and the Giant Peach and about other things too, I believe.
Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory.
That's right. It's just that's a mind trip to me. The whole James Bond goes full ninja. I just have a tough time with that unless I've had an adult beverage, allegedly. But what I do like about this film is it continues the Bond template, as it were, of having usually an interesting opening gambit. We get drawn to some mysterious location around the world. We get to see some foreign exotic location, especially for the time when it was filmed here in the early 60s. So, yeah, my initial thoughts are it's a good movie, but compared to the other ones we've talked about so far, it's not necessarily high on the list of that. That being said, it's fun. What's your initial take?
I agree. It is fun. We talked about Donald Pleasance, and I know we don't get to talk about him until towards the end of this, but I really do love his performance. All this build up that we've had for the movies, we finally get to see him. It's great. But I suppose we should go ahead and go on with the movie itself. Talk about it. So,
Take us through the gambit and theme song.
Yeah. Well, it starts us out in space, the final frontier. A craft called Jupiter 16 is up there, and there's a man about to go out of the ship, and he does. So he's outside of it, and that's when something, well, you know how Houston sees a problem right there? Well, It seems they do have one because something is approaching. It's another spacecraft. It's unidentified. The front of it opens up into like these 4 claws. I mean, grabs the ship, takes it away, and shuts, cutting off one of the astronauts. So a man is instantly down. From there, though, we cut to snow. And it seems that they're having a meeting of sort, world officials, because America is blaming Russia. And Russia is saying that they absolutely are not behind this. And that's when the UK goes ahead and says, well, we have our own theory that it's something related to Japan. The Japanese could perhaps be behind this. They already have a man working to collect evidence. Who's that man? James Bond. We see him. His work is with a girl named Ling, who they have just enjoyed their time together. And Ling gets up and she's puts on a robe, and Bond is laying in the bed. And that's when Ling, I can't remember exactly what she says, but she presses down on a button, and the bed that Bond is laying on goes up, and that's when men rush in and shoot him down. Quickly from there, police enter the scene. They pull the bed down. It seems Bond, James Bond, is dead, and one of them jokes how he died on the job and he would have wanted it this way. And that's when the music, You Only Live Twice, comes in. It's not my favorite song, I'll admit, and this isn't my favorite opening by far, but the song is good, and it's sung by Nancy Sinatra. How can you dislike that?
Easy, because it's not my favorite song either. It's nice, but there's nothing remarkable about it, and it's hard to, I think, now with several films in, and especially with like 20 something, maybe more to go, there's going to be one that we think is number one or top five versus bottom five, and we'll argue that as it goes after each change of actor. But for me, it's an interesting title sequence because it has an Oriental theme to it, and Japanese in nature. What I do like about this opening gambit being filmed in the early to mid '60s here is that for its time, the way they put the politics on screen here and danced around certain topics, I think was interesting because we have the space race going on at this time for complete supremacy. That was a thing, and it was legitimate back then too. And obviously with the U.S. dumping metric crap ton of money into the space race, that's when we had a big interest in science being pushed even down to the high school level with physics classes and everything else there too. It's a radical shift in terms of funding. That being said, having shots of the war rooms of whether it's McDonnell Douglas or somewhere that they got some stock footage, I imagine for the time that was pretty neat. Obviously, it's a little dated now, but again, we're talking like 50 to 60 years ago. So I think the best line though is because it's pure James Bond. After him and the lady have sweet relations because they're just laying there, she gets kind of like pissy or whatever like that, and he's like, you don't think I'm the best? And she's like, no, it's just different, like Peking duck versus Russian caviar, applying the different types of women that he's already bedded. And she goes, I give you very best duck. Such a bad line. I love it. I think Connery's really comfortable here too. But yeah, after the theme song, to your point, we get a nice little transition shot. Boom, 10 minutes in, we're already in a different part of the world. We're overlooking the view of Hong Kong Bay, where we see some people watching a boats. And this is the spy stuff I really like, because this is an overly elaborate way of killing off James Bond. We see his burial at sea, and it's totally absurd how we watch the body float to the ground, but then we see divers pick up the body that's all wrapped up, and it gets taken to a submarine, and the people that are there unzip it or whatever, and we see that he's got the air piece in his mouth or whatever, and the guys take it off, and he opens his eyes, look at the captain, and goes, permission to come aboard, sir. Those kind of scenes are really awesome. You have this big elaborate setup here, and then you get like a little quip like this. It totally works for me. Really, really enjoy it. And then we find out really quickly as he's in his full regalia that this is a big deal because Emma's there and Miss Moneypenny. And for me, I already love, of course, Miss Moneypenny being that anchor, and I always loved it when Bond would throw his hat onto the thing. It doesn't happen 100% of the time, but most of the time it does. And M, you can't say nothing about him being a boss or whatever. And it's basically saying, we don't know where it's at. It's your job to find out, but it's probably somewhere in Japan. And again, at the time, with not saying too much, Japan had been being bombed out in World War II, communism taking over China, China being communist, taking over certain countries around then, Hong Kong being a UK territory until the late 90s, and even in the past few years with whatever's going on currently politically, not getting into that. It's one of those things where it's like at the time, this must have felt really exciting because this is really capturing world events at that time pretty quick. Really like all this too. Moneypenny gives him a book of instant Japanese, and then Bond leaves in a tube and winds up on shore before we see it transition to another city moment there. So I'll pause and let you interject your observations as we get to this next scene.
Yeah, no, I enjoy Moneypenny as well. I think this is the first time we hear him call her Penny rather than just by full name. And whenever she, at the end, gives the password, which is, I love you, he won't say it back, of course. She's not very happy about that, but she goes ahead, gives him a book of instant Japanese, and that's when he reminds her that he took Oriental languages. So he will be just fine. So whenever he's shot from the sub, which is a little ridiculous, but he's in Tokyo. As he's walking through the city street, there's a girl watching and reporting in this radio handbag that she opens up, and eventually he gets pulled aside by this one man and points to another man, leading to where the sumo wrestlers are wrestling. They go into the ring. I can't remember the exact term.
Let's just call it the dojo.
Dojo. I think it is something similar to that, but I don't think it's actually called a dojo like like a karate dojo. But so they get him in, and they're watching sumo. That's when this one lady comes up and sits right by him. Bond looks, I don't want to say confused, but that's the only word that comes with that expression that I see. And eventually the two keep glancing at each other, missing each other's gazes, and finally their eyes meet. And that's when he says, "I love you." And she says that she has a car and she's ready to take him to a hotel where his friend, Mr. Henderson, is there. The match is over and the two quickly leave, and they're driving. And to that hotel they go. With a knock, the door opens and we see Mr. Henderson. He reveals that he's been there for about 25 years after Bond takes his cane, because he's not too old looking, but the cane, Bond will take it. He hits him on the leg and we hear like a thump because it's fake. He explains how he lost that. But he quickly explains to Bond that he's going to be meeting a man named Mr. Tanaka. He's the head of the Japanese Secret Service. And that's when he goes ahead, like a good host, makes him a drink. But am I here?
Yeah, now you are. Yeah,
I dropped out. What was the last thing you heard me say?
You said as a host, he does the proper thing and he makes Bond a drink while he's telling him about me going to meet Tanaka.
Yes. But the thing about the drink, I don't know if you noticed, he said stirred, not shaken, right? When it's
nice observation.
Not stirred. It's a shame, but quickly he reveals, as he's still talking, he stops suddenly. And that's the problem with paper walls, because it's quickly revealed that he pulls Henderson away from the wall. He had a knife in his back through the wall. So we get Bond chasing this assassin that's wearing a face mask. And Bond quickly gets to him, beats him, takes his mask, and he puts it on and approaches the getaway car for the assassin. And he's acting injured, like he got shot along the way. And so they go to Osada Chemicals, and he's quickly carried up to an office. He's dropped on the couch, and that's when the man goes ahead and takes off the mask. And that's when Bond says, "Good evening," before it leads to a fight. And I really enjoyed this fight. He goes ahead and he takes a couch and he starts using it to beat the man. We get a little sword action. And finally, Bond is able to knock the man out with a statue. Then he drags him into this pull-out bar that comes out from the wall. And he goes ahead and makes himself a little something to drink. But that's when he notices a safe. He goes quickly and begins to work on it. And that's when we can hear footsteps. Guards are approaching. So as they're coming, it seems that they're going to come in, but they stop and walk away. So finally, he enters the final number. He's using this little device to go ahead and get in. And as soon as the vault is open, an alarm goes off. So the guards come back and they have their guns ready, but Bond hides behind the doorway. So they come in, pass him right by, and he slips right out. Eventually, they do get to chasing him. And while we get a little gunplay, he makes it outside, and the girl from earlier, when he said, "I love you too," arrives to pick him up. And she says that she's going to take him someplace safe. But that's when Bond says no, he doesn't want to hear that. He wants answers. And eventually she stops the car, she gets out, and she's running down tunnels. And eventually she does stop at at another set of stairs when it seems like she could just go right up. And that's when Bond slows down. He approaches. And that's when the floor falls out from under him. He is slid down into another office where a man is there, and he introduces himself. Bond asks how he feels about him, and he says, "Why, Mr. Bond, I love you." And this is Tanaka,
Yep.
also called Tiger. He goes ahead and hands him some information, especially about exotic chemicals. He has some questions about that. And they go out into an underground rail car. We're finally introduced to this. This is the Bond girl to me, this is at least the main one. I understand that there's a character later on that seems like she might be, but this is the Bond girl for this movie for me. Her name is Aki, and that's when they pull up a photo. It was shot by an American woman, and it shows a picture of a ship by a strip of land, and it was taken by an American tourist. And she was liquidated. That's how they can go ahead and put it, because of what she had seen. And that's where I'll take a moment and let you catch up, because a lot just happened.
Well, one of the things I wanted to basically say over this extended sequence, one, it's pretty long and it's a spy sequence, and I love these things here too. He's following people, and one of the things that's really neat about the way these scenes mesh together is there's this great contrast between the old world Japan and the new world, because you get to see a cultural event, something of significance, and they don't rush through it. Where, one of the people that we see, the lady that sits down to him, he says, "I love you too." Obviously, he's concerned because he doesn't know who he's meeting. So we get that feeling that he's got an extremely high radar going off now, trying to make sure nothing bad happens. And you got to have a little bit of that paranoia to survive. And yet we watch the sumo wrestlers and everything too, and I love it when a movie does this and pays, homage to whatever culture they're involved in. And, somebody that may know this may go, "Oh, well, they're doing it wrong because maybe the audience is too loud." Japan's concerts, typically people are very quiet and respectful, whereas in America they're loud. So I don't know how that plays out. But that being said, seeing this on a big screen when you're a young kid, it's very impressionable, because you think of Japan and you see, like, bamboo, you see really small spaces, the robes, all this old world stuff. But then you see like the density of like the of different cities, and the way he's driving through with some scenes, just how packed and crammed it is, and you're like, wow. And so yeah, he's on this strange ride with this woman, and I like how when she leaves, again, we see like some of the bigger cities, and they're at the Osada Chemical Company industrial building where that he breaks into. And I agree with you. I like this fight scene. I think this is a really nice set piece. We've had some great big elaborate set pieces that look upscale with a very minimalist kind of design, which for at the time I think probably looked fantastic. I still think they look good. And it doesn't look overly dated, except maybe the shag rug in it or whatever. Some of Bond films have that in it. This one's not too bad, but the walls themselves are like the rice paper or whatever. But him picking up, like you said, the sofa and bashing a guy, that's good stuff. Even if it's sped up in some parts a little bit, I don't mind. These are fantastic scenes. But then after he defeats the henchman and he pours himself a drink to recompose himself where he sees the safe, he kind of spits and he looks at the bottle and he goes, "Siamese vodka." That's the stuff that we start really getting used to with James Bond. And you got to be careful with that kind of humor, because it can get a little bit silly later on in the franchise. But right now, not too many spy gadgets yet, but he breaks into the safe with a built-in safe cracker device that he happened to be carrying with him, which is convenient, but it's not some of the really horrible, easy stuff that we would see later on. I do like the chase. Because the lady takes him through the subway and she's baiting him, as we know. And the whole thing with meeting Tanaka here, it's a nice little meeting, because it shows us, hey, Tanaka's not screwing around. He's the man that's in charge. You come into my place. It's my rules. I'm going to let you know what's going on. And again, we see this really wonderfully elaborate, beautiful set piece of very minimalistic design with Tanaka basically showing off. So it gives us, the viewer, somebody that we're seeing in this film, a sense of competence too. So it's nice. Bond's not dealing with a doofus here or government red tape. He's meeting basically a very high level type of counterpart in another world, and he recognizes that. So getting to see Bond's professionalism, his paranoia, the spy stuff here, all in the span of about 10, 15 minutes is great. And yeah, it's good writing. How do you feel about me? Well, I love you. I mean, it's dumb, but it works, and it feels like it's really, really good spy stuff too. So I definitely like this too. And here's another thing. People don't wear suits anymore. Of course, in Bond, he wears suits a lot. This guy's wearing a suit that's really high class. You get that a lot. That's one of the things that makes you go, man, I want to be a spy because, look, different cultures. I'm educated. I know different things. I get to say domo arigato. And Bond gets to be a nerd about how sake's served at a certain temperature. Um, I like the scene. Well, it's just one of those things too. And for the spy stuff at the time, they touch bases as far as what's going on too. Basically, what's going to turn out is that Bond's going to go kind of undercover to meet Mr. Asado, the guy who's in charge of the building that he just literally invaded. And I'm not sure if that's exactly his office, but let's just assume it is for all intents and purposes. But what I like about this whole scene coming up with that is that we get to see Bond go in there, and before he goes in that evening, Tanaka shows him yet another one of Japan's pleasures. Um, and it's sexist maybe by today's standards, but that's just how it is. He invites Bond in with a bunch of ladies to get bathed and
I was
taken care of,
watching
so to
this
speak.
scene with somebody. I don't mean to interrupt, but he said, "Wow, that's so sexist." But from what I understand, it's true in Japan.
Well, the thing too is if you go get an athletic massage, like and of course everyone will tell you that because of tips and everything else, most people are going to sit there and say, oh, can I have, and and they always recommend what is going to match up with you too. So it's just one of those things. It's not sexual here. It's just they're doing their massage, they're getting serviced, if you want to say, in a way. And I don't mean that sexually. You're right, that's a cultural thing, and they're showing it on screen, and I don't think it's really a big deal. Some people might be prudish about it, but that's what happens. And another
But
thing too is the service industry like this after the world wars really exploded in Asia there too. And without getting too dark about it or whatever, he does meet Aki, who comes in to massage him. And yeah, this may be the Bond woman that you're thinking of, but you're going to interject something here.
yeah, I was going to say when Aki comes in to take over for the woman who's massaging him, I think he does get his little happy ending there.
It's alluded to, but that's number 2 for Bond here today. The next scene, though, is the next day. The Osato Chemical Company. We get a little bit of the James Bond theme playing, and we get the view of the same building they broke into. And I like this because they should know who he is. You got the guard just kind of look at him, and the guard's got a scar on his face. And he goes in and he meets the guy. And this is a little cat and mouse because they're watching, they're looking at him. Bond's dressed real nice. He's got the briefcase, and he's just faking something. There's even like a gun, a looking camera pointed at him, and he sees somebody flying off in a helicopter on top of the building. I like this scene a lot. He meets Redhead in there while he's meeting Asado, and he's just basically, I want vitamin C, and he kind of has to bluff. And this is where Connery is so slick and smooth. It's great. But the guy sitting across from him has the X-ray stuff, sees that he's armed and everything. It's a little outrageous because what evil corporation guy has this stuff automatically pre-built in? Not much, but there's this nice little thing about how in Japan business is done a certain way that's different than the United States, in terms of respecting your elders and family businesses, and it's completely different. And Japan's economy really grew big when we sent people like Deming over after the war to kind of help rebuild after we bombed the crap out of them. But meaning, I should say, the United States did, for our international listeners. But yeah, as soon as he leaves, there's the hit squad on. The lady picks him up, and they have this nice little car chase scene too. It's not over the top in terms of action sequences until the big helicopter comes up with the magnet and lifts the bad guy's car away. I'm like, wow, that's pretty interesting, because it just takes them all around. They're watching it on the Sony cameras, and then you see them just drop the car in the bay, and I'm like, that's pretty badass. It's pretty simple, but we just don't think of something so grand like that happening. But my God, I liked it. And then, of course, they drive away and then are going to a shipyard here, which I'll pause for a moment.
Yeah. When the giant magnet came out, I was like, oh, this is where we're going with it, huh? And also, the redhead who was ordered to, ordered Bond's death is a little disappointed. You can tell.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to kill Bond. I think there's some instant chemistry there. But luckily, she does return, because after we go through the shipyard, the chase there is good too.
I love this chase. It's a great chase scene, actually. The shootout stuff sucks to me in here, but it's a gigantic industrial factory. And the thing I like about it is you got the theme song playing as an instrumental. Bond's running out, and it's we would call it a drone shot now, but it's a helicopter shot, let's say. And he's on the roof, and people are chasing him, and it's a real time, long, continuous shot, and he's just hit people running away. And it's the Osaka's actual port, as it were, where all the ships are at. It's just a really nice looking shot, especially for its time. You see guys with bamboo sticks and everything, and Bond manages to kind of almost escape. But we've discovered part of the Bond template is he does get captured a lot. And then when he does get captured, he meets somebody. So let's just pause right here because it ties in what you're saying about the redhead.
Yes, because Bond is taken. He wakes up and Miss Grant has got him now. And he's tied up to this chair, and he's getting interrogated. She pulls out a blade as he's lying about why he's there. And she goes ahead and she starts, I don't want to say threatens him with the blade, but that's what it's alluding to. But that's when she leans in and just kisses him. And that's when he admits, I'm actually a spy, And she knows. And he says that the chemical compound that he is getting is worth, I don't remember how much, but he offers to split the money with her, and she says no. Asada would kill her, and that's when she goes ahead and she just cuts the binds, frees him, and then offers him the blade. He takes it and he cuts the straps of her dress. Quickly, we cut to them flying. She is flying the plane, and he says that once they get her out of Tokyo, he'll be able to protect her. But she says that she has another appointment. She presses a button, and this wooden board comes out, this tray, and it locks his arms in. And that's when she climbs out of the plane, parachutes away. He does end up getting out of his binds, and he goes to the front. He manages to crash the plane without dying for the first second, but he quickly hops on out of it so that way it can blow up behind him. And you never look at it because it's not cool to look at explosions.
Yeah, it's she's got, I call it the lipstick bomb scene, because when they're flying in a plane, she just drops it, and that's like this big explosion, and she jumps out. That's kind of cool seeing a woman go out and do a big stunt like that. The scene too where she captured him just right before that, where they're kind of negotiating. Bond knows that he'd be dead, but because he's valuable, being alive, it puts him in a position of power. So when he admits that it's a spy, it's alluded to me that she feels like she is gaining the upper hand because of that, and to seal the deal, of course, she sleeps with him. But after he manages to escape, and we didn't need that big ass explosion, it's just an explosion for explosion's sake. They're meeting with Tanaka, and Aki's like, oh, he's not chasing her. He would never touch a horrible woman like that. And he's like, yeah, I wouldn't, But this is the scene where, of course, you meet Q. So he's there with Tanaka. They're on this little beautiful, it's a shot that shows whatever bay they're at. It's really nice and beautiful looking too. But Q, I've said before, he wasn't in the first Bond movie, but once he started showing up, it was really neat. You got these guys bringing like these 4 or 5 gigantic suitcases with stuff in it, and Q gets a chance to show off about stuff. Um, it's like a small, very, one person cedar with machine guns flying contraption device. I'm not crazy about it, to be honest with you. I think it's a bit ridiculous, but of course that's what we're going to be using in the movie towards the big battle scene at the end. This is one of the issues I have with it. It's just a little much for me. I just
In my
don't like
note,
it.
in my notes, I have Rob hates it right here. So
Really?
yeah, because it's a little copter and it is a little ridiculous. I agree,
He
but I
looks like a
knew
little kid with the like sitting on the fire engine with his hat on. It just doesn't work for me. It's just goofy, and I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's nice the overhead shots flying and seeing like some of the actual bays and towns or whatever that well, that's cool. That's really really neat. So like I say, it's neat. He's using it to go over a fishing village to do some recon work too, and you see women that are fishers out there, and they see like this little volcano kind of area that he infiltrates, and you got to watch out flying there because the gases can choke out lack of oxygen and stuff. And this we're getting into a really really big plot part of the whole movie, because for now, basically almost an hour in, halfway through, it's been for the most part a spy movie with a few action sequences, some chases, typical Bond sort of thing. But as he's flying, checking out this volcano or whatever, turns out he's got a contingent of like 4 or 5 helicopters that just appear out of nowhere. They start firing them, of course, versus 1 on 4. Bond's able to defeat them in really bad looking scenes, which at this point just to go grab some popcorn or take a leak. Um, I'm indifferent to this. It's not awful, but it's just, I'm not even going to complain about how dated some of the back shots look and how Bond's hair is not even moving in the wind while he's turning around. Everything that's going on, and the Bond scenes overlapped on it. It's just, yeah, you're right. Doesn't work for me. I'll pause here before it transitions over to the missile launch part. Go ahead.
yeah, that's where um I enjoy the scene. I enjoy the chase with the helicopters. I think it's absolutely just ridiculous in thinking about it, but it was fun to see. And the heat, I understand that heat seeking missiles, they are indeed a real thing. At the same time, from where it's shot, I don't think it would exactly be able to lock that target with the kind of helicopter he has.
It's like an 8-bit video game.
Yes, indeed. And as Professor Pixel, you have approval in that message. So after Little Nelly has completed the mission, he heads back. And this is where we see the Russia launch. So up in space, we can see the ship. And that's when another object. Oh, who could it be? Oh, no. Another rocket coming to take the cosmonauts that are there. And cosmonauts are quickly taken. We then see the ship flip itself around, and it starts its descent to Earth. And the dip in the land that we saw earlier, where there was a lagoon, it's revealed that it was fake. It's actually a launch station. And that's when we cut quickly to the Pentagon. The Russians think the Americans are behind it. They refuse overall to believe that Japan could be behind this. And the British are just ridiculous. That's when, of course, we see in Japan the ship lands. And they air out all the smoke afterwards, and they shut the crater and get ready to move the men out. Quickly, they remove the Russian craft, get the cosmonauts out, and from there, we see who but number one. He says that he's going to go to his apartment, and if anybody needs him, he'll be there. And quickly, there's somebody already waiting for him. They say that their government is satisfied with how everything is moving along, and how the Americans and Russians will be at each other's throats soon enough. And that's when number one says, "Oh, well, I'm glad that you're satisfied. The plan is almost done, but we need the money now." And they aren't happy to hear that. But that's when number one goes ahead and shows off his piranha tank. And he says that they drop like a hunk of meat down there.
Big old
Right
ham
off
hock,
the
it looks
corner.
like.
Hmm?
Big old ham hock, it looks like.
Yeah. And it doesn't even take 10 seconds before it's stripped of meat. So that's when number one says to think it over. And then we see Osada and his assistant actually called number 11, called into the office. He's not happy with Osada because James Bond has escaped. So he tells them to go. And that's when, while on the bridge over the tank, one presses a button and drops number 11 into the piranha tank. It's a real loss right there. Pardon me. And that's when he orders the death to Osada of James Bond.
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't crazy about the action scene, but what I do like here, it's one of the things I think that makes a Bond film look really good, is the set pieces. The volcano being kind of phony in a sense, being just a base there underneath, or at least a dormant one that they've hollowed out. Technical engineering marvel on a big scale. Love it. What's even better looking is the building inside too. This is super elaborate. It's awesome. We never see Blofeld's face, but we see him stroking the cat, and that's one of the iconic images I think of Bond, especially when you're like, what the hell is going on? Why is a bad guy, got a cat, and he's got the Spectre ring, pinky ring on too. To me, I just thought it was really neat. People may have mixed opinions currently in James Bond about what's going on with the whole storyline with Spectre and trying to make all the movies tied together, but it all kind of comes back to this from 50, 60 years ago about we've got this evil corporation, maybe kind of sort, but it's really a front for Spectre, who's really a front because he's being hired by a high power. And simply stated, because we don't try not to get too political in here, but the idea here that it's maybe China as a communist country and it's England fighting against the great evils of the world is how a lot of people take a look at James Bond, that he's their special superhero, even though in America we love James Bond. That was a threat considered by many people after World War II that had to be addressed, which led to a lot of things. And you can argue whether it's right or it's wrong. That's just simply how it is historically. So without really making a commentary about either side, it was significant in terms of this movie that Spectre may be hired by a company to do stuff. And, whatever it is, it's not really gone through a lot in the movie. But if you're somebody that's lived at the time in the world, or definitely British, you can recognize that it's very familiar, and you recognize the terror of it too, especially if you're from Asia. That's why the next scene that we get to see, where they come upon this beautiful looking, I forget the name of it, this wonderful looking castle, Japanese castle. He meets Tanaka, and you see all these people training in different things, not sumo wrestling, but they're outdoors, old school style. They've got I forget the name of the pants, they're barefoot, but they got the swords going on. The problem I have with some of these action scenes in here is you see like some swordsmen like going through a bunch of guys, hitting them. You don't see any blood stuff or whatever. And it's like, was he really killing him to show that he's the best? I mean, I know it's a demonstration of Bond about what we have as assets that we plan to use, and here's going to be the big plan for us to capture them. It was just kind of like, all right, it's another cultural thing that decided to, ingratiate into everything here, and it works. Bond's got a really nice pink and gray ensemble on here, along with some sandals, keeping up with the Japanese motif there, and it actually works for him. It's not quite a salmon pink, but it works with his skin tone and everything. Yeah, we get the underground lair where you see the handgun that fires like little mini rockets, as it were, the smoking cigarette stuff. It's like, I didn't need two Q scenes in this movie. I just needed one. But then this is what Tanaka tells him, this is what's going to happen. You're going to take a wife. We're going to turn you ninja. and turn you into family. And at this point off, I just think the rest of the movie is absurd. I'm going to stop here and let you handle this while I compose myself.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Oh, look at these rocket bullets. No, what? And the cigarette that he takes and he just blasts a bullet across the room. That's absurd. And yes, the amount of times that he says you would become Japanese. I do not, this could not be made today. As we like to say here, this could not be made today. That we go and cut through, and he's calling it a night that evening, and that's when he goes ahead and appears in Aki's room. So he goes ahead, lays by her, and during the night we see a man climbing in the rooftop, or on the rooftop, coming through. And this, are you saying you don't like this too? Because he takes this thread.
No, this is badass. This is one of the best scenes in the movie to me. That where the ninja infiltrator comes in. Yeah, it's she says, "Oh, from now on you must do everything Japanese style," which means screw Japanese style because Bond's on what, number 3 now or 4? He comes in and he looks like, I don't know which one it is. The James Carrey one from Dumb and Dumber. He looks awful. It is so bad. But yeah, it's implied that they're making sweet, sweet love. But this is really, really cool. Where they take the thread, like you say, with the was it the poison or the tarantula or whatever?
The poison.
It's the poison. Yeah, I'm thinking of Dr. No with the tarantula. This has reminded me of the tarantula. This was really cool. I like this.
I thought you would. I thought you would like it. So I was surprised when you said just a minute ago, everything here else is absurd. Well, this one little thing, though, is really cool. As we see the poison drip down, and it's going right to Bond's lips, but that's when they shift in the night, and Aki takes the hit. She starts choking, and Bond wakes up, and that's when he takes his gun and he shoots above them. And Tiger hears the gunshots and quickly comes, but it's too late. Aki is dead. And
if you sleep with Bond, you're gonna die unless you're the one that holds out till the end of the movie. I mean, that's just like the rule right now.
Yeah. So after that, we get to a training montage. So we see him fighting a little bit. One tries to get him with a staff, and we see a blade that pops out at the end of it, and he tries to get Bond, but Bond is too good for him. And it's revealed that's just another spy to kill him, that he's a man from the outside. And finally, we cut to the marriage that Bond dreads, because he's told the entire time that he is going to have a wife with a face of a pig. So 2 pass, and they're not the loveliest ladies Bond's ever seen. But the last one, if the last one is a pig, Bond's going to be high off the hog right there. We quickly cut through the ceremony, and there's a boat ride into the fishing village. The wife takes him into her home and explains that they will not be sleeping together. She says, I'm going to sleep over here. You take the bed, because you didn't use a real name when we got married, so we're not actually married. That night, while Bond's sleeping, Tiger comes and explains that they do not have 4 days like they thought. The Americans have changed it. The date is now midnight their time. And Bond's wife now wakes up and says that everything's around here in the fishing village has stayed the same, except just recently a girl went into a cave, and when she came out, she was dead. And he asks the wife to take him there the next morning. She's like, yeah. So we see them going through the morning. She gets a little swimming in there before they get to the cave. So they dive, they go in, and that's when he's able to tell there's a gas. So they quickly go out of the caves because the gas is there to keep people on out. And that's when they see the main volcano. and where the lagoon is at the bottom. And he says, we have to go all the way over there. Do you think you can make it? And the wife says that, yeah, she'll be fine. And eventually, as they're trekking along, the wife asks to rest. And that's when he is able to steal a kiss from her. And that's when a helicopter goes right over the pair and down towards the lagoon. Bond says the honeymoon is over and the trek continues, but they do not arrive in time to see what happens to the lagoon. And the last thing I'll mention is we get a Pentagon cut, and the launch is happening, and all the U.S. Can do is wait and pray before I hand it back to you.
Yeah, some of the things that I did like about this part here. Yeah, we get another training montage. Okay, that's nice. That's great. And of course, Bond's better than everybody there, which is kind of silly. Now, I think the Bond character is supposed to know judo. He's supposed to like be a languages guy, I think from Oxford, and also I think a pilot or whatever. He knew how to fly while he was serving in the Navy, if I recall correctly. To me, it may kind of make sense with his ability to fly, and so I think somewhat consistently the movies so far have captured that, at least in here too. So I like those little bit of touches here too. This woman that's supposed to be his wife but not really, was it Kissy Suzuki? um, Remember, this is a fishing village, and these people they're fishermen, but they're also divers for pearls. Here in Central Florida, we used to have a place where you could go diving for pearls at SeaWorld, which has changed over the years. And I remember as a kid, you'd pay like $1 or something like that, and a lady would dive down, and she's dressed like a mermaid, kind of almost, and she was Japanese, and she'd pick up an oyster and open up in front of you, and you would get a pearl. And it pissed me off because I did it when I was a kid, everyone yelled and screamed because apparently the one I selected had a pearl, but it accidentally got dropped into the bottom where they couldn't find it again. And that was my introductory to the tourism kind of nonsense that we have here in Central Florida. And I say nonsense because it reminds me of what happens here in this Bond film coming up next. Because yes, while he does deal with all these women in the fishing village, there's something about fishing villages that we'll talk about here at the end. Remember Tanaka? He says, I'm going to outfit you with 100 ninjas. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's great, Tanaka. We're just going to see exactly how this plays out against Blofeld and this cool super villain dude that's got a volcano lair. This is badass. How the hell are 100 ninjas going to, deal with it? So they're scoping out the hill or whatever, any other timelines coming up on it. We get back to where a helicopter flies into it. And of course, him and Kissy are, Kissy's pretty attractive, actually. They're making out, and they just happen to, by chance, during their almost sweet love making, the foreplay, if you will, notice it. And then they're like, yeah, we're going to have to get in and check it. So this is basically the big to-do for the final scene where we see the launch going up. And the whole idea of it being instigated is really what puts the timeline here and forces Bond's hand. But they literally walk down to the supposed lava area, which just looks like solid green goo. Looks like what Nickelodeon would have had, only frozen and green. But yeah, I do kind of like how Bond discovers it, because again, when he's sitting there and he's trying to walk on it and it starts to retract or whatever, he sees what's going on and knows, hey, this is it. So Bond gets lucky a lot, but he also gets captured. But this is the big setup for the rest of the movie, which honestly, this has been the most boring parts of the Bond movies to me, because they're just an overly elaborate shootout where people don't look great on it. The punches and everything else that gets lampooned is really, really bad. And it gets to the point where, of course, he's able to sneak his way in with literally hundreds of professionals working around with these cuts of outer space stuff going on. So to me, I'm going, okay, I get it, but I'm not a fan of countdowns. I'm not a fan of, even though they're great set pieces, it's just a bit unremarkable to me, and it's not what makes a Bond film a Bond film. He has a little bit of a device where he's able to rescue a couple of the astronauts when everybody comes in ninja style, and it's just got all the sounds that come up a lot. This is a Bond thing too. You swing a punch, you make contact with somebody, you get that quick little trumpet, boom, 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 boom. But Kissy's gone back to the town to kind of let Tanaka know and everything. And it's neat because as a diver, there's some bad guys trying to get her, so she dives down and they can't see her. We see Blofeld's when we say we see Blofeld, we only see his arm with him stroking the cat. We don't see his face. So we get some shots of all this. So we're supposed to be, having this big bit of suspense. And of course, they dress undercover with the guards they subdued, and they basically walk right into the main thing and knock guys out that aren't paying attention. This is just bad. It's awful. It's just boring. It's not exciting. Ooh, what's going to happen next? Well, we know what's going to happen. All these guys wearing red shirts, like from Star Trek, that we know are going to got. Basically, you've got a bunch of them going around. It's just an excuse to have a high body count of people here at the end. And finally, when things really escalate, you see Blofeld from the front lean forward, and you finally see the beauty of Donald Pleasant's unblinking mug, with a scar over his right eye as he confronts James Bond. And he's like, "You only live twice, Mr. Bond." And it's just awesome to see Donald Pleasance. To me, he carries this whole final scene, even though he's not in on it. But unfortunately, it really cements, I think, in your mind that this is the way they're going to do the third act of the James Bond films. And I'm just not a fan of it. I'm not saying it's horrible or it's done bad. I'm just saying it's anticlimactic on a rewatch. All the stuff that's kind of cool that you can get into and feel like you're being a spy with, it just kind of feels ridiculous. I'll pause here because there's a little bit, about 10 minutes more left, but you can get a chance to catch up.
So when he rescues the astronauts, they are getting into the main area where they're getting the astronauts ready, and they dress Bond up in a spacesuit.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to bring this up. We were robbed. Because, and not talking about robbed from you, Rob, but we could have gotten Bond in space. But
I see what you did there.
With number one watching, he stops Bond from boarding, sends the reserve astronaut, and they cut it down. Instead of 90 minutes to launch, it's now like 7 minutes left. And that's when we meet number one, Blofeld. And it's Donald Pleasance. We've been hearing him this entire movie, okay? But when you see him, it's so good. It just makes the performance go up by like 10. And I forgot he was in this. I really did. I love that so much. I did see this movie, but I forgot that he was in this, and I don't know how. So that's when they strip Bond of his spacesuit, and they're getting ready to launch, and they blast off. They shut the crater, and we see Bond's wife outside, and she comes with Tiger and his army of ninjas.
This is so bad. Bond's got the cigarette thing, and Blofeld's popping off on him like, "It won't be the nicotine that kills you, Mr. Bond." But of course, it's the stupid little dumb device that's able to be used as a distraction while all these ninja come in and, dozens of gun people. They can't even hit a stupid ninja coming off a friggin' rope. It's horrible. I can't stand this. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's really I don't care for it either. So as the crater's shutting and they're going out, they blow a hole in the top. One of the ninjas that are all coming out. It's not great. You're right. But one's plan is still in motion, even with all these people coming in. He says it's impregnable, but that's when it seems it's not so impregnable. So one leads Bond and Osada as well. He has a gun out and he's forcing him to come because the plan's still not over. And we see as they go into a rail car, he shoots Osada because, he failed to kill Bond.
That's right. This is the price of failure, Mr. Bond. You just want to repeat everything he says because he's so damn good.
And that's where he's about to shoot Bond before a ninja throws a throwing star and knocks the gun off balance, and Bond lives as Blofeld is riding away. They help Bond get up the staircase. One's muscle is still in his office, and it's time for one more fight. Eventually, Bond quickly knocks the guy into the piranha tank and says, "Bon appetit." In space, the approach continues until Bond finally finds the button that he needs to, blows up the rocket before it can grab the American spacecraft. We see number one then blow up his own base as he's leaving, and this causes all the ninjas to run, and they're swimming out as the volcano is going off. They manage to make it to rafts, and we see Bond and his wife are alone, watching the volcano blast once more. And Bond then mentions it's time for that honeymoon. And she says, why not? But they'll never let you stay. And they celebrate until a sub emerges below. This is the one movie where at the end, he does not end up getting lucky. That is the end of this movie.
Yeah, what was kind of cool here in this end scene here too is Blofeld escapes. So we could make the argument that Bond's actually an incompetent agent because a great deal of luck and follows him around because he gets captured. He always fights somebody that seems to be better than him or bigger than him or something unique, and something lucky happens. Now, the fight he has with this pre-Dolph Lundgren massive individual, Blofeld's muscle in there, the set piece again for Blofeld's office is just awesome. It's so sexy, it's big, it's expansive, it's got really expensive looking items in there that are very warm and comforting feeling and looking. And the Bon Appetit line where he knocks him in. Again, it's a bit farcical, and unfortunately when you have a little bit too much of this kind of humor, I think it devalues the serious nature of some of it. And I'm not saying this has to be overly serious all the time, but sometimes balancing it can be tough because you can lean too much in one direction. And it is British humor, which they like their little puns and stuff too, and that's what we've come to know. Not just saying Bond, James Bond, but all these stupid lines. But I do like how Blofeld escapes. Yeah, he's probably, I don't know if there's a cap on the amount of women Bond was allowed to have relationships with in each movie, because it's like, okay, you just had this big, exciting thing happen there, and you're with Bond, and you don't do it maybe. Of course, while the thing blows up is just kind of silly or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I agree with you. The main Bond woman did die off, but then some would say she is. But I still think Bond bones her in the end. I really do. No pun intended there. I just mean at the end of the film, because we're going to see several more Bond films that basically are just a rehash of this template. And unfortunately, that devalues some of these movies even further. And as the Bond franchise goes through its iterations that we talk about over the next several months, one movie at a time, we're going to see where that plays off, not into Bond's benefit here too. So by now, these movies are making money hand over fist. I think this one was 10 times its budget, so it's raking in the money. Connery's making a metric F ton of money off of this. Everybody's enjoying it, and it is what it is. So for my final thoughts, when we get the ending scene there on the sub there, it says, well, James Bond will be back on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I like that. I always like how when they leave you, they're going to tell you what's coming next. So you're automatically, when you're left with this movie, go, oh, great, I'm already primed for another one too. And this movie is significant in that it actually is a break between Sean Connery playing Bond, because allegedly this would be the last time. And then we're going to get something totally different with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is an extremely divisive James Bond film or two. But I have to say, we started off with Dr. No. Things definitely improved with From Russia with Love. When we talk about Goldfinger, a lot of people think that's one of the best. Some people would argue that Thunderball might be a slight drop off from it, even though it's an action, more of an action type film with the underwater sequences, so it's overly elaborate at the end. And then we get this. So right now, out of these five, I think this is the weakest. It's watchable, it's enjoyable, it is a Bond film, but it's just a bit silly, and it's not as cool, I think, as some of the earlier Bond films. And people will have their opinions. That's one thing we like to talk about. But overall, it's watchable. You can do worse when it comes to Bond films. But right now, we're only, I think, 5 films in. So be curious to see how this compares in a few months from now when we talk about other films and how they may be the same or different. What kind of final thoughts do you have for this film?
No, I do agree. This is one of the weakest films that we have thus far. I really, and this is a spoiler for how I feel about the next one, I really do love where the next one goes. And it's sad to see Connery go, but he was done with the movie, so it seemed. And we had to move on, and this is This is the famous one Bond coming up, and I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah. I have very strong opinions about On Her Majesty's Secret Service too, so it'll be interesting when we talk about that. It's a interesting film, so to speak. Yeah, I think at this point maybe it was just kind of like, all right, well, we got a movie to make. Let's make it. Let's get it done. Let's get it out there. It's Bond after all. So this is where Bond becomes bigger than just somebody's idea or whatever. It's definitely an extremely solid, profitable franchise. So you're going to milk this thing till you can't milk out anymore, and it's still going today. Somewhat 40 plus years later, 50, 60. So can't criticize the success that these films have, maybe just the quality of some of the films, but I'll take it. It's not bad. It's one you can put on when you go, well, I haven't watched this one in a really long time and don't know everything that's going on, because this is one of those ones I just can't really rewatch. Donald Pleasance is an asset. The use of the Japanese culture, I think, is great. Them not going too deep in the communism angle that would be really apparent at that time, I think was a smart choice to not offend any particular audiences business-wise. Yeah. All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. James Bond, You Only Live Twice, or in Donald Pleasance's case, you're going to live a little bit more until we see you and talk about you in a bunch of other films here, because it is starting to be October here on the Xtreme Movie Show. Take a look at some other stuff we did. We're currently covering Twin Peaks, episode by episode. We're just now currently in season 3. We have a few requests for some horror movies to come out, too, to review. We're going to be doing some of those, some of the old Hammer films, some of the newer things that are getting ready to release in theaters as well. Go ahead, Pixel.
Oh, I was saying, yes, I'm excited to dig into those and get those out to you, the listeners.
Yeah. All right, there you have it, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for spreading the word about it. Check us out on our Facebook page, Xtreme Movie Show. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that kind of nonsense stuff. We're supposed to stay here at the end if anybody's listening. Let people know, because word of mouth is the best thing that you can do. Just ask James Bond. He will return on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and so will we. Have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.